Okay. Well, welcome everybody to this afternoon's webinar. I'm Sophie O'Keefe and I'm the Professional Development Manager at English Australia. Thanks for coming, and thank you also to the webinar presenter, Gordon Scott. Gordon's the Managing Director at Job Readiness Training. And Job Readiness Training is a company that helps job seekers to apply for work, nail interviews, land a job, and then keep that job. Thanks for joining us today, Gordon.
Thanks, Sophie.
Gordon will also be briefly joined by Catherine McClymont. And Catherine will be talking about her experience transitioning from ELICOS to another sector. So Catherine worked for 13 years in ELICOS teaching and coordinating, and she now works for the Queensland State Government. She's spent the last 2 years as a trainer and will soon be moving into instructional design. Thanks for joining us, Catherine. Okay, Gordon, I'll hand over to you now.
All right, thank you, Sophie. And I'll just set my screen share up. Here we go. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. And, I'm fully aware that for a lot of people in the audience, we're dealing with a difficult topic. Dealing with job loss and redundancy is a process that many people have to go through. And of course, within our industry, very many people, unfortunately, are having to deal with that process during 2021. Even though there is a light at the end of the tunnel in relation to Australia's economic upturn and the unemployment figures improving, sadly, for those of us who work in the international education sector, it's just not the case at the moment. So we've taken the opportunity today to prepare some information that hopefully will be of value to you in terms of managing your way through this process, understanding what kind of options are available to you. And we're really fortunate to have the participation of Catherine McClymont, who will, a little later in the presentation, give us a bit of an insight into her experience in pivoting out of the ELICOS sector and into another industry. And what we thought we'd do at that stage is take a specific look at Catherine's transferable skills from ELICOS and how she was able to apply a couple of those in particular into a job application process to help her move to another sector. So in terms of background, I was the person who first set up the initiative called Study Brisbane, which focused upon attracting international students into the education providers, the Crocos education providers across Brisbane. That was about 11 years ago now. And from there, became involved in the national board for one of the peak industry bodies in the international ed sector. And I could see that from a student perspective, even coming to study in Australia was an amazing experience. And I think that as an industry, we'd done a great job in perfecting the experience. But many students would still come up and say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now that I've graduated. How do I get a job? And so it was from there that I established my first online training company, which is called Successful Graduate. And that still operates today, in fact, with a lot of customers across the Australia and Asia Pacific region. But the material is student facing. And so along came the pandemic last year, and we could see straight away that there were going to be many people in the Australian economy who already had jobs, who were probably going to need to apply for different work. Either they were unemployed or underemployed. And so it was actually the Executive Director of TAFE Queensland International, one of our customers, who said, the material you've got that's student facing, really, you should also be making that material available, rewriting it and repurposing it to suit present market conditions for people who are losing work in the sector. So that's where we're at. And today we're going to focus upon a job readiness training course, which is called Dealing with Job Loss and Redundancy. And I'd just like to take you through the rubric of the material that's been developed there. It's already been used by quite a number of people in the ELICOS sector to good effect. And at the end of the webinar today, I'll be giving you access to a number of courses that we'll provide for free to audience members. And once those have been utilised, there's a certain number of them. Once they've been utilised, there's a discount on gaining access to the course material. So we build today's event as something that would be of interest not only to employees or job seekers in the ELICOS sector, but also we feel that there are probably employers who have yet to grapple with the issue of handling and managing redundancy within their organisation. And so welcome to all of you in what is, as I say, a fairly difficult set of circumstances at the moment. So to that end, we will, when we get to a slide a little further down, just launch a little poll, and Sophie will handle the poll for us. Really, for my benefit, it's to help me to understand who's in our audience today. We feel that the majority of you will probably be a worried employee or somebody who has been made redundant and is currently seeking work. Please ignore the text here that says Zoom poll now open. We'll actually turn that on shortly. And based upon some previous experiences we've had in delivering similar webinars, we know that there'll be some employers and some curious folk out there as well. So contextually, yeah, unemployment in Australia is dropping. But it really did peak, didn't it, a couple of months ago? And we saw in the Australian context that in July last year, there were some 1.1 million people who had either lost full employment or were underemployed. And that's now pulled back to about 875,000 people, which is still a lot of people. And there's been an awful lot of talk in the media about what is full employment and is a 5% unemployment rate healthy for the economy, etc. That's all well and good, but it actually makes little difference to those of us who are in that situation at the moment. So I thought maybe just to help with your emotional response and coming to terms with where you might be at the moment with your employment, let's have a look at this in context of some other markets. And so arguably two of our larger competitor markets, Canada and the United States. Now the Canadians are travelling at around about 8% unemployment, but we've seen their borders open to international students. And so it'd be really interesting to have a look over the next couple of months at how employment within the ELICOS sector in Canada is tracking. Likewise in the US, okay, 6.3% in February, but the really interesting thing is that from the perspective of how the United States captures their data, there's actually more than 10 million unemployment payments. There's actually 18 million unemployment payments. And so I think that the statistics are slightly skewed. And in fact, we're looking again at a situation where there's more people than are being counted. This old issue of being underemployed as opposed to being completely unemployed. And so hopefully from the perspective of where we're at in the Australian marketplace, that helps you to see that there are markets which are worse off than us. Our issue is, for our industry, we need the borders to open again for students. And clearly the Australian government is only going to be prepared to do that once there are safe travel bubbles in place and a critical point has been reached with vaccinations in those markets. So what I think we'll probably jump into now is a bit of a rubric on the way that our Dealing with Job Loss and Redundancy course has been laid out. Our approach is to deliver our training material through asynchronous online training at scale. And so my hope is that this video will work. I ran a webinar last week and for some reason our internet wasn't so crash hot, but this just gives you a little bit of context about the material that we're about to run through.
Right now, finding a job is hard work, but two Brisbane businessmen are hoping to make the hunt a little easier. They've developed a program for job seekers and it's back to basics.
When COVID hit, Mariana Jamil left busy London and her busy work life behind. Back home, finding a job was a job itself.
When everyone else is out there doing the same thing, it's a bit hard to be like, I'm the special one.
A dilemma many face, and one Gordon Scott and Philip Winning are on a mission to fix.
In fact, we've discovered that up to 106 people are applying for one single market entry position.
They've developed an online course, Job Readiness.
Look, I'll stop that because I can see we're having internet problems again, but suffice to say that statistic was a little alarming when we first launched the business. And so how do you beat the competition then when it comes to applying for work, if indeed that's your choice and your outcome related to the process that we'll work through today? So look, Sophie, I might see if you're there and if you might be able to launch question 1 of our poll, and we'll just take a look at who's in our audience today. All right, so the first question is simply to self-select. Are you here because you're an employer? Are you here because you're worried about losing your position? Are you here because you have lost your position and you're currently searching for work or undertaking further study? Or are you simply curious? I'll give you another 5 or so seconds just to click on the box that's most applicable, and we might see Sophie, if you could share the results. Okay, well, I'm sorry to see that the majority of you are in fact either in an unemployed situation or you are worried about losing your job. And 0 employers today. So that actually helps me to contextualize the rest of what I'll present in that case. Okay, well, in that case, let's get on with the material. So the process of managing job loss is one that really is full of human emotion at the beginning. And so I'll jump into some detail about this in a tick, but our rubric is to gain some perspective around where your present situation is vis-a-vis others in the industry, to take stock perhaps in the fact that the Australian economy is picking up and unemployment is reducing, and to help you move through some of the emotional, financial responses, immediate responses to handling your situation. And then we move into some of the more practical aspects related to the definition of redundancy in Australia, the paperwork that might be involved, ensuring your employer has done the right thing by, etc. Then we move into a process of helping you to identify your own values, your identity, your strengths, and ultimately your purpose and your confidence. And the course goes into a lot of detail about how you can follow some rubrics to be able to do this. I say time and time again that confidence and resilience are the critical soft skills involved in applying for work, particularly when we look at statistics like 100 people to one position, 100 applicants applying for one position in some cases. Then it's a question of how to go about taking some action, developing a direction for yourself, determining some small short-term goals and some longer-term goals related to you personally and related to you within your career. And then finally, it's about choosing the first steps to take and getting on with the direction that you would prefer. So as a journey, the very first thing that hits most of us, depending upon our personality type, is the emotional response to losing work. And I'll just jump into some tips and tricks around the emotional response now. Forgive me if some videos jump out at us. I'll pause them because I think that it'd be better just to talk through what we have here. Okay, well, the first thing is that from the perspective of redundancy, in Australia, there's a definition around it, and that definition, which is reinforced by the Fair Work Ombudsman and the Workforce Ombudsman, is that it's the position that's made redundant. It's not the person. And so I think it's really important to try to remember that. As personal as it feels, for 99.9% of people who go through the process of handling redundancy, it's because their position is no longer viable within the organisation. And clearly, I think we all understand that with so few international students who are in the country at the moment, our employers are having to take action about their bottom line, and probably very reluctantly too. I imagine a lot of employers have been holding on for as long as possible to try and hold on to hope that perhaps things would get better within the industry and that would see students come back again. So please try to remember that the process of emotion that you're feeling right now is something that is human. We all feel it. And, you know, it starts off usually with disbelief and shock. Many people move through a series of steps where over days and weeks, they might start to feel some numbness and then actually start to feel a little bit of anger before they finally start to accept that this is reality. For many, it's that first day when you don't get up and put on your work clothes and go into the office that reality really starts to hit. And yes, I am speaking from a personal perspective. I've been through this process myself. So I just want you to remember that these are standard human emotions. It is actually akin to the grief cycle, and therefore expect to go through this range of emotions. And know that by the time you reach the point of acceptance, you're going to be in a better position to be able to do something about your situation. And so, look, we go into a bit of detail about handling the emotional response. I dare say for some of you, you might already be a fair way down the path with your emotional response, and you want me to get on to talking about tips and tricks on job applications. But first, I would say that there's also an immediate financial response that most of us will need to go through, starting with taking a look at how you're going to manage your expenses while you're either looking for further work, choosing to undertake further study, launching your own business, whatever you decide to do. And so we've developed a redundancy budget spreadsheet that we just offer to you as part of our training to help you to gain an understanding about your short-term and mid-term, as well as your long-term expenses, any potential other income that you might have coming in, and then sort of make some suggestions about how you might go about minimizing some of your expenses. So, for example, I believe there is still financial relief available through many of the Australian banks for mortgages. As a result of the experiences that we've had with the pandemic over the last 12 months or so. The final point here in the context of emotions is that you don't have to do this alone. So it is important to speak about what you're going through to others. In fact, we go so far as to suggest that you embrace where you're at the moment, and even let people know that you're open to work. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's no shame involved in it. Everybody understands the present market circumstances. But if you need support, and if you don't feel you're getting the right support from your family or your friends or your former colleagues, then just know that there are a lot of other links in this training of other places that you can reach out to support you, not least of which likely to have been through your employer, your former employer. And so that kind of support from professional people who understand the emotional impact is there, and it's free of charge. So please take advantage of it. All righty. So next is to then take a look at some of the practical aspects of managing the redundancy process. And at this point, I'm just going to pop into the training because I think I'd like to give a little bit of, where is it? I'll deal with it in a sec. There's a little bit of material that we've provided here that helps you to look at the, if you like, the definition around what is legal redundancy in Australia. What are the critical pieces of paperwork that are involved practically with handling redundancy? Now, these are the responsibility of your employer, but I think it's helpful for all of us to make sure that each of these boxes have been ticked properly. Redundancy doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, particularly for employees who might be on particular kinds of contracts or maybe casual employees. And indeed, there's a category related to small business. So that you'll see in the training, there's a small business fair dismissal code definition for you as well. I've spoken about financial relief. I'd also make it, would want to make a point here that it's important to have a look at your tax situation and your superannuation. So your employer, if you have been made redundant, if your position has been made redundant, sorry, does have certain obligations related to payout based upon length of service within the organisation. There'll be a final superannuation payment, and of course, you've got to look at how you'll manage your tax. So a fair amount of practical information and some practical steps there that hopefully will help you just to work through some of the more mundane and automatic elements associated with the realities of handling the paperwork with redundancy. We've designed that particular element to be put in straight after handling emotions because it is fairly immediate. Particularly, it's important that you're able to make sure that the process has been handled appropriately, the right paperwork is in place, and that you understand how to manage your finances immediately after the event. Okay. Then we feel it's important to start to take a look at who you are. And there are some pretty powerful exercises that have been entered into the training here, which are designed really just to help people to redevelop a sense of purpose, to understand that even though you may have felt as though your identity and your purpose for the last however many years was tied to either your vocation or to your employer, in fact, there's a lot more to you than that. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, we do tend to allow ourselves, in a sense, to be defined by what we do. It makes sense because we get up and we go to work and we spend the majority of our working hours in this zone, and so therefore our identity should be tied to our vocation, sure. But now's an opportunity. If you think of it this way, it's a really good opportunity for you to sit back and just think about who you are. What kind of purpose do you have in life? And I know that for a lot of people who are in teaching professions, that they have a certain personality which is designed and focused upon supporting other people. And that's really great. So think about your broader sense of purpose. And look, again, lots of material available in the training course based upon this particular concept, including some great exercises to help you to find meaning both at home but also at work, and think about who you are holistically, what it is that you can deliver to the world that's actually going to be of benefit to both other people and to yourself, etc. Some people consider this to be a bit of woo-woo. I actually think it's really important for people to be able to take the time to self-reflect and to determine, therefore, what is going to be most meaningful to you as a next step in the progression of your career. I'm having lots of fun with slides here, so bear with me. Okay, so after we've looked at your purpose, I think it's important to start to focus upon some of the elements that are going to fall into your resume, and that we all have strengths and weaknesses. So let's take a look at what some of your strengths are. What are some of your core soft skills and your hard skills? How do you break them down in a way that's going to be meaningful to a future job application? What are your core values? How would those values about you actually be compatible with the organizational values of a future employer? Have you thought about the kind of alignment that you can create between who you are and the employer moving forward, bearing in mind that your sense of identity should be more about yourself than the employer? We introduce you to the concepts of and the soft skills of developing confidence and resilience. These are ever so important in a competitive environment when looking for work. We round out this module with some exercises that focus upon improving your self-awareness and your habits. Wow, when we find ourselves at home for the first time in years, perhaps, wondering what to do, it's important to develop new habits, because you would have had habits in the workplace. What are the kinds of positive, healthy habits you can develop at home related to exercise, related to mindfulness, related to your diet? It's really important to look after yourself. And for many people, bad habits can form when they're in a foreign environment or a different situation. So just think about how you can focus upon some really positive habits for yourself. The other element of this particular phase of managing the process, I like to call embracing the liminal period. And for those of you who are educators, you may be familiar with the concept. And it is simply that if we allow our subconscious to think about the options that we have available to us, it's quite surprising what can come up as a series of options that you may never have considered in the past. Another way of looking at it is, have you ever thought about, gee, one day I'd really love to push my career in this direction, or I'd really love to start my own business, or I've always talked about going back to study a certain topic. So the what if and the one day is gone now. You're in a situation where actually you can take full advantage of that. So again, a set of exercises here just to help you to think about a timeline, if you like, in your life. Everything up until now has happened and you can't change it. But everything that will happen in your life moving forward hasn't happened yet, and you can change it. So really think about how you can embrace this liminal period. We've had some lovely feedback from staff from ICE at the University of Queensland and Kaplan and other ELICOS colleges who've actually found this particular module to be really quite helpful to them. So I trust that you'll take that on advice. So what I think would be helpful now, looking at our time, is to really just spend a few minutes delving into then, let's assume you do want to apply for more work, and we'll look at some other options in a minute. But let's delve into what are some of the more practical impacts that you would have to work through in relation to managing your resume. And thank you to Sophie and the wonderful staff at English Australia for reaching out to members and contacts in the industry. We've had a couple of people actually volunteer their resumes to us. So the first is Megan, who is actually unable to join us today because she's living in the United States now. I suppose we could wake her up. No, let's not do that. So Megan in 2018 had a profile which involved a series of different teaching roles that she'd had within the marketplace in Australia. And isn't it interesting to have a look at how she's completely reformatted her resume in 2021? I'll go back again. She just really started off with who she was and the experience that she'd had in the industry. And again, here you can see is somebody who's spent years working for a particular employer up to 2018, who then moved on. So what she was able to do was to identify some of the more transferable skills that she had within her resume and apply them to a slightly different element of the industry, and indeed into a different market overseas. So in her resume moving forward, Megan's been able to focus upon more of her key qualifications, her hard and her soft skills, and how she would be able to utilize those particular skills to transfer into the US State Department. So thank you, Megan, for your contribution there. What we might do now is we'll just ask Catherine McClymont to come on and to talk us through her resume. She's also provided a 2018 and a 2021 resume. Are you there, Catherine?
Hi, Gordon. Hi, everyone.
Thanks for joining us, Catherine, and also in particular doing so in such a really neat way after the school pickup. So I'm sure everybody appreciates that. Let's jump to your 2018 resume. Yeah. Do you reckon you could just talk us through, that point in time back in 2018, what you were doing, and I guess the process that you then started to work through when it came to looking to switch to a slightly different industry?
Yeah, sure. So in 2018, my family had just moved cities. We'd moved from Melbourne to Brisbane. And obviously I'd had to leave the work that I was doing in Melbourne. The work that I'd been doing in Melbourne had been several part-time jobs with, at the same time as having very young children. And I guess with the moving city, I was sort of ready to take on a job with a bit more commitment. I didn't want to work just sort of 1 day a week. I wanted to work 3 or 4 or maybe even full time. And I guess it was a time when I was looking for what my next step would be. Gordon, you talked before about finding purpose. Yeah. And I think that was sort of a process that I went through. I experimented with doing teaching work once I moved, but what I found is that with young kids at home, I wasn't the teacher that I wanted to be, because the teacher that I wanted to be gave a lot of my personal time and energy and commitment to my students. And I wasn't being the teacher that I wanted to be. So I thought, okay, so what else can I do?
So what drew you to teaching in the first place?
Honestly, it was travel.
Right.
Yeah, I was one of the ones where I finished university in international relations. Right. And it's very, very difficult to get a job with an undergraduate qualification in international relations. And I guess my choice was, do I go to London and work in a bar, or could I go somewhere else? So I did a CELTA and I worked in Moscow for a year.
Wow.
And that was fantastic. And, why would I want to do anything else? I worked overseas for a long time and it was a wonderful experience.
So you really had 10 years then in and out of the ELICOS sector?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fabulous. So then what changed and how did your purpose shift?
Yeah. So I guess when I came to Brisbane, I was looking for a job that I could stay in for a long time. I was looking for something that was easy for me to, or not easy, but it was possible to balance with young kids. Yeah. And possibly something which was transferable. It was sort of a different experience. Okay. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'll go to the next slide and just sort of let you talk through that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I saw this job advertised at the Electoral Commission. And I started doing some research and I thought, oh, that sounds quite interesting. I obviously was interested in politics because of my original degree. I'd also done a little bit of, as ELICOS teachers, I think we're often just interested in earning a bit of extra money. So I'd worked at polling places on election day a few times, which, was a touch point with the Electoral Commission. And when I did some research, I realized that was an organization that was heading into a really busy period. So I thought, oh, well, look, it might be quite fun and exciting. And it turns out that it was. Basically, the Electoral Commission, it expanded from 40 people to 10,000 people.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So what they were looking for is people to assist with that transition. Is 40 permanent staff and 10,000 people on election day. Right. So the role that I ended up being successful in getting was a general sort of training role And my main responsibility was to write the training publications that's used by the staff at polling places. So when you go and vote, you know, the people are only working for one day. So their training program needs to be really clear.
Mm.
So what I found was that as an ELICOS teacher, I had developed some transferable skills. I had to deal with that kind of imposter syndrome at first. Remember, I'm coming back to almost
Meaning you weren't a lifer working within the Queensland government.
Exactly. I wasn't a lifer. It was my first time in government. I was transferring sectors, and also I was coming back to work after having young kids.
Mm.
So it's a really huge transition. And I think, like, you know, we just have to be a bit kind to ourselves if we're finding that transition difficult, because I did, and I talked to other people, and it's really common to find those big transitions quite mentally challenging. I was coming home every day completely exhausted because there was so much just new procedures to get to understand.
And look, can you talk us through the actual job application itself? I mean, I imagine being a Queensland government role, it would have been fairly formal.
Yeah.
They would have been.
We had to write 2
criteria?
pages of selection criteria.
Yeah.
And the kind of questions they were asking, it wasn't immediately obvious how to translate my ELICOS experience, but when I thought about it kind of carefully, it was possible. So it's things like, so as an instructional designer, we talk a lot about SMEs, which are subject matter experts. Okay, so there's lots of new acronyms to get hold of, but it was sort of talk about a time when you've had to work with a challenging subject matter expert. And you might go, oh, okay, well, you know, as an ELICOS teacher, maybe that's not something we do. Maybe they're not subject matter experts, but we develop really strong skills in dealing with challenging people as a whole. When a student comes into your class, you don't get any choice. You don't get to say, oh, sorry, I don't really get along with this person. You take them as they come and you work out ways of developing a strong working relationship with them quickly. And those are the same skills that I've transferred to my new role. Like sometimes the subject matter experts are notoriously grumpy or notoriously difficult, and we work out ways of working with them.
I mean, did you make many fundamental changes to the structure of and the content of your resume?
I think I highlighted some events experience. When I worked as an ELICOS teacher, I quite enjoyed the professional development side, and I organised a few events for English teachers. So I highlighted that. What else did I highlight? I highlighted the communication skills. I think as a teacher, we get very good at explaining things in very simple ways. And the Queensland government at least has a real emphasis at the moment on plain English writing. They're really attempting to move away from legalese, a lot of jargon and text that's difficult for the average person to understand. They want everything to be written in a way that is very easily understood by the average person on the street. And as English teachers, that's what we do. We make difficult topics easy to understand.
And clearly you were able then to, if you like, repackage your experience and your skills, both your hard skills and your soft skills, and present them in such a way that was meaningful to employers in a different industry. So look, I think that's amazing, and congratulations. And
I think the other thing, sorry, Gordon, I just might say that Cert 4 TAE made a huge difference.
Talk us through that.
Yeah, so the Cert 4 TAE is a vocational education and training qualification. I know sort of a lot of people do talk about it, and for some of the English language teaching related roles, it's become essential. But having that qualification enabled me to make that transition into, not in terms of what I knew or what I was able to do, but in the way that employers saw me.
Right.
Yeah.
And look, so many people tend to just throw the old resume out into the marketplace and hope that they'll land an interview off the strength of it. But one thing that I'm always telling people is that it's just so important to restyle and reformat your resume to suit the job that you're applying for, even if it just means redefining some of your key attributes and skills, or putting them in the same order as they may appear in the position description or the selection criteria that you're addressing. And I think for you, sorry about the mugshot, but I thought, we have to see who we're talking to here. You mentioned to me yesterday that there were a couple of really top transferable skills that you were able to identify out of your previous career, if you like, and place into this job application. And you've already started to talk through some of these, but maybe you can just give us a bit more detail here about why you think these were your top transferable skills.
Sure. So I feel like the ability to communicate clearly is a bit of a no-brainer, but it was surprising to me once I moved into government. I was almost surprised that not everybody had this skill, but they really don't. So as a trainer, one of the key things that I bring to the room is that I could always consider the learner's needs. I always consider the audience's needs. And quite a few times with my colleagues, they'd stop and go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. I think just as a teacher, that's really natural to us, but I found that outside of teaching, it's not. Obviously, we develop the skill to clearly communicate complex topics in speaking and in writing using plain English. So I feel like that's a given.
Yeah.
The interpersonal skills, I think as teachers, we develop really high levels of emotional intelligence, and that enables us to work with a wide range of people and to negotiate the outcomes that we're looking for, and often in a sort of a win-win situation. And that's it's a really valuable skill. And I don't think people realize how important it is until they get into the position where it's needed or where it's lacked.
And it can be transferred into just about any workplace.
Absolutely. But as teachers, we've had a lot of experience in developing that skill. Also in helping people feel relaxed and calm when they're talking to us. That's another one that I kind of probably didn't value, but as a teacher, I think my natural sort of teaching state was I really liked working with beginners. I liked working with learners who felt nervous or scared about using their English and developing their confidence. And I found that that's a really useful skill to take into the workplace as well. People report that they feel relaxed working with me, and that's a really positive thing.
Must be a family trait, because we discovered yesterday by accident that I used to work with your aunt, I think you said.
That's right, yes.
And Elizabeth definitely has that trait as well. Listen, if I notice that there's some real fan mail coming for you on the chat, Catherine.
Oh, really?
I suppose. Well, it's a big thing to sort of share such personal information, so we thank you for doing so. And look, I just think if there are any particular questions that people might have for Catherine, pop them onto the chat now, and we might just be able to answer some either now or towards the end of the session when we move to a bit of a Q&A. So if Catherine's mentioned anything there that has piqued your interest and you'd like to explore a bit further, please pop it into the Zoom chat and we'll address as many as we can towards the end. All right, well, thanks, Catherine. That's really great and appreciate your input. Okay, well, look, for so many people then, once we reach this stage in the cycle of handling job loss and redundancy, we've worked through, the emotional response. You've looked at your immediate financial response. You've embraced the opportunity to rediscover who you are, your purpose, your core values, your top skills, both hard skills and soft skills. and you really have taken stock of, I guess, the type of directions that you're interested in pursuing through embracing that liminal period and understanding that the future is yours. Then I guess it's time to start to make some choices about what you think is going to be best for you. Now, for many people, the easiest thing for them, and really the decision that they make, is that I've always loved what I've been doing. Teaching is for me, so I'd like to continue to pursue a role in teaching. Or you may have had a role in administration or a role in management, whatever it might be. Just remember what you've heard Catherine talk about today. It is very possible for you to take your existing skills from the ELICOS sector and to identify which of those are transferable, and to learn how to transfer those skills into positions and job applications in other industries. So making decisions about your career direction would be, I guess, the first step to take. The next step is then, what are you going to do about it? And for many of us, we sort of say, oh, I'm just going to throw my resume out 100 times and hope for the best. For others, we might say, well, I don't know how far and wide I am going to be able to cast my transferable skills. So my suggestion would be to do some research, talk to colleagues of yours, talk to friends of yours, and understand what are some of the industries that you might be able to transfer your skills into, and put a box around them. Insofar as undertake to yourself that you're going to try and identify appropriate positions that are available in those industries and develop some goals. So, you know, we talk in the course about short-term goals, long-term goals, of course, using the SMART goal setting system. And so I think we're probably all familiar with that. But really, how many of us do sit down and write down some goals, which, you know, are measurable, do have a time frame against them, and involve you actually taking action? And so I think it would be great if you could take the time, once you've reached this stage in the process, to make some hard decisions about, right, this week I am going to find 5 positions that I think I've got the ability to apply for. And I'm going to really go through the process of tailoring my application and my resume to the positions that have been advertised. The next thing that I think would be really helpful for you is to consider how you can go about gaining access to networks. Now, a year ago, when we wrote this course, networking was all online, but happily, things have moved forward and progressed with the pandemic to the point where for most states, we're able to get out and about and to join networks. So, you know, I would have thought the very first thing for you would be to update your LinkedIn profile. And apologies, Catherine, I forgot to embarrass you further by putting yours up on the screen. Maybe we'll get to that later, but it'd be really interesting to delve into what changes you made to your LinkedIn profile. From the perspective of the course that we've delivered, we've got a module in there about networking. And I think that, just remember, you can network online, you can join webinars like this and get to know people. There is a way to do that. But also, very importantly, if you're thinking about shifting to a different sector, then take the time to understand what are the networks that you can join, the events that you might be able to get along to, and the types of approaches that you can then take to people to try and start a conversation about finding work in that sector. We always say, you know, the worst thing you can do is rock up and say, hi, my name's Gordon, can I have a job? Rather, it would be to try and finesse the conversation around to a point where you can raise the topic and seek the advice of the person that you're talking to in that networking session. If you were in my position, how would you go about gaining access to this industry? Is there anybody you think I should talk to? So these are the sorts of tips that I think are going to be very helpful when it comes to decision time for you on taking action. So yeah, a lot of detail has gone into this particular topic in the course, because it's really where the rubber starts to hit the road for most people. And then finally, here is where, for some, the decision may actually not be to apply for work in their known industry. It might be to, having embraced the liminal period, to start their own business. That's what I did, and I've never looked back. I absolutely love it. I get to meet far more people. I get to support tens of thousands of students rather than just, a handful. I'm my own boss. So for some people, there is absolutely a decision that can be made to move forward with starting your own business. There's a lot of downside to it. There's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of financial pressure. It'll be some time before money starts to come in. But just consider your options at this stage. For others, it's very much about updating job application skills. And as we've seen in the resumes that have been presented today, sometimes, we work for 4, 5, 6 or more years for a particular employer, and the old job application skills can get a bit rusty. And so if you feel that is you, and apologies if this looks like a plug, it's not really, but we've developed a series of courses on the Job Readiness Training website, which have been designed specifically to support people with the different elements to updating their job applications. So there's a course on self-awareness and how to sell yourself to an employer, a course around networking and how to gain access to the hidden job market. In other words, how to find a job that won't necessarily ever be advertised, but is likely to be recruited through who you know. Perfecting and updating your written job application skills, so your resume, your responses to selection criteria, and all of the written elements such as a cover letter or an email that you might send to an employer. Finally, the final two, improving job interview skills. We've dropped a couple of Perla job interview video questions into this course, and there's a group exercise that encourages you to record your response and to share your group with others in Australia who are going through the same process. And if, of course, this has taken into account the online job interview in response to the fact that we all tend to sit in front of our computers when we talk to people these days. The final course probably wouldn't be so relevant to this audience, but it's really been designed around helping younger job seekers to understand how to manage relationships in the workforce and to be able to try and remain employed. Now, for others, again, I won't name names, but a number of customers in the ELICOS sector have decided at the end of our training to actually do what they love for a period of time with no pay. And one of them's become a poet, another one's become an artist, and these people are taking advantage of some downtime effectively. Others, again, take advantage of being able to trial, even mid-career, to trial with an employer in a different sector, come to an arrangement where you might do a couple of days of work just to see what it actually is like working in the government or working for a completely different kind of employer. So remember, that's an option. The final two options that seem to be popular are undertaking further training. And again, Catherine's dropped us some suggestions there about, from an ELICOS teacher's perspective, how a little bit of extra training's been able to help her transition into a different industry. And for others, again, I know plenty of people in the international education sector who are probably thinking about, how long do I want to remain in the industry? So it really depends upon your personal circumstances. But for some people, early retirement is also an option. I dare say that for the majority of you, it's going to be about updating job application skills and getting back into paid employment. So look, I hope that this has been helpful. I'll just take a quick censor check. We've got about 5 minutes left. The rest of my slides really were related to employers. And given that we don't have any in the audience, I think I might pause there and just see if, Sophie, you might be able to drop the next survey question to our audience. Just keep an eye on my screen to see if that one's still available. Sing up if it's not, and we can just move to Q&A. Okay, just to help us, there are actually two questions. So first of all, which role in the ELICOS sector have you been working in? And this might help us then to move into some Q&A. Have you been working in a teaching role? Have you been working in a managerial role? Have you been working in administration? Or have you been working in some other role? Bearing in mind that about 95% of our audience is either worried about losing work or have actually already lost their jobs in the ELICOS sector. So I'll give you another 5 seconds to answer that. And Sophie, we might like take a look at the results. So bang on. Okay, most of us are teachers. Yeah, we have seen a lot of managerial roles go in the industry. Zero administration, and one person has listed themselves as another. So have a think then about any questions you might have for the chat. Bearing in mind that we now know that most of you are teachers, you might have a particular question for Catherine, for example. And Sophie, the final poll question, if we could. Do you think there will be more job losses in the international education sector over the next 12 months? Guess which answer had a 100% result when we did this with the IEAA last week. So the answers are bingo. Alrighty. Well, look, I hope that has been of some value. Now, let me jump to some closing slides. I told you that I would give away some courses. So if you jump on to jobreadinesstraining.com/English Australia, there are 10 free courses that we're giving away, just to thank you for staying awake for an hour listening to us to talk. It's jobreadinesstraining.com/English Australia. And the code that you can use is actually listed on that page. But from memory, it is simply, where are we? EA10. Use the coupon code EA10, and that will give you access to the Dealing with Job Loss and Redundancy course for free. All right, look, Sophie, thanks for putting the poll up. Have we got any other questions or comments, either for myself or for Catherine, before we finish up?
Yeah, Gordon, I think if you open up the Q&A, there's a question in there, the third one down.
1, 2, 3. I see that you've covered a bit of a summary. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, and not in the chat itself, but the Q&A box.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yeah. Okay.
So Claire McGrath, thank you, Claire. 3 comments there. So for Catherine, there was providing evidence that you meet criteria seems onerous but critical to get past the initial cull. Yep, and for me, have you found differences in how people write their resumes for different fields? Example, marketing versus education, or is that we are just not used to selling ourselves? Thanks, Claire. Great question. Yes. Look, clearly, if you're a graphic designer, you're probably going to want to demonstrate some of your ability in your resume. I have found that, in fact, people need to format their resumes based upon more so the recruitment process. And by that, I mean that in this day and age, a number of employers, particularly larger ones, use applicant tracking systems. Effectively, you're invited to upload your resume into a server. And the applicant tracking system will search your resume for keywords related to the position that's been advertised. And as sucky as it sounds, a lot of people who use an ATS end up accepting the ATS's suggestions on who might be shortlisted for interview. And so that means that you actually need to look at how you can maximize your chances of your resume in having its keywords being picked up. It means stripping out the formatting of your resume. It means getting rid of images, and it means focusing upon delivering the keywords that are in the job that you're applying for. For others, and hopefully for the majority, we actually get to be assessed by a human being. And so, you know, particularly for the really heavily competed and contested jobs, it's just so important that your resume is capable of being noticed in that 30 seconds attention that you're likely to have from an assessor who's going through your resume. And so that's why it's important to keep it short. It's important to put the skills set that the employer has usually really clearly laid out in either the position description and the selection criteria, or the advertised position itself, say the blurb that you see on a SEEK listing. And so for a lot of people, this is what I mean, they fall into the trap of just chucking their existing resume into the pile. And unless it really stands out in the language of the position that's been advertised and in delivering the key skills, the hard skills and the soft skills and the personal characteristics that they're looking for in a person, it's unlikely you'll be shortlisted. So look, that's just a minor tip. I hope that that's of some value to you. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, our time is up. Thank you to all of you for being with us today, and in the future, for those of you who might be watching this on a recording, you're very welcome to stay on. I'm sure Sophie will be able to handle some more questions afterwards, but I think we're probably out of time, so I'll hand back to you now, Sophie. Thank you also to Catherine.
Oh, thank you, Gordon. There was just a question in the chat about the link, if you could confirm the link. Someone was saying it wasn't working.
Sure thing. So you can see the URL here. It's jobreadinesstraining.com beg your pardon, /English-Australia. That's my bad. So that's probably, that's our computer trying to take over what we put into the system. English-Australia after jobreadinesstraining.com. Thanks, Sophie.
Great. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming, and we will share the link to the recording with you tomorrow, and please feel free to share the recording with anyone else you know who might benefit from watching this as well. And I'd like to say thank you to Gordon and to Catherine for sharing your practical and really action-oriented advice and insights with us today. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else here has also got a lot out of this session. Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks again. Good luck, everybody.